Hi, everybody. Welcome to Kindred Skulls. I'm Matt Freese. I'm here with my co host, Nick Olson. Nick, how are we doing today?
Good. It's a busy time of the year. I feel like everybody at work wants to get everything done before year end, and I gotta do all my Christmas shopping, and I gotta do all the Christmas lights still, and I gotta send out the Christmas cards, and it's a holiday season, so everything's crazy, and it's also the end of the year, so it's been like a whirlwind week. So, but I'd found the time still to go through all the L-22. Excited to dive in
There,
with this Lions game. I actually thought it was one of the more interesting games to study and talk about because there were a lot of I don't know. Maybe I'm biased towards offensive explosive production passing games, but that's what both offenses were doing, and they were both doing it. The Vikings, it was the stars, the talent winning out, and with the Lions, I think it was they were scheming circles around our defense. So, fun to dive in. How have you been? How you doing?
yeah, I'm doing good. Just got a ton of wrapping of presents done last night. So I have the vast majority of that done. I still have a couple stragglers coming in, but I figured while I had a little bit of free time, I should probably get that done before it gets crazy here the next week or two, just with preparations and stuff like that. So, no, definitely happier on my end. The holidays are here. I'm taking off all next week, so that'll be fun for me. But with that being said, why don't we dive right in? And I think I want to start with the defense first, right? Because I think this is the story that most Vikings fans are taking coming out of this game, is just how abysmal the defense was in this game. Obviously, we allowed the Lions to march up and down the field in the second half, I would say. In the first half, it was more confined to explosive play touchdowns, but those are still very bad for your defense to be giving up, right? So the first question I have down is, why was the pass defense so bad? And I figure we'll both rant about this for a little bit, but go ahead, Nick.
Um, it was a lot of things. I think the biggest thing is just the players aren't executing, which is something nobody really wants to hear because it's not to absolve Ed Donatel and the defensive coaches of any blame, but here it's not like Ed Donatel called one of the best defenses in the league last year in Denver, and Ed Donatel has called a lot of actually really good defenses over the years in Denver and with Vic Fangio and with the 49ers before. So, and it's a lot of the same stuff that Fangio has been running, that Fangio has used to cook up some of the best defenses in the league. So, I mean, it was a lot of just breakdowns and miscommunications. Coverage was very soft, and they let a lot of guys get wide open. There were a lot of just glaring holes in zone coverage, and I think
Yep.
one of the differences is there always tend to be a few holes in zone coverage, but the Lions were very smart. I think this was honestly was one of the best called games by an offensive play caller I've seen in years from Ben Johnson on the Lions side, where he always knew where the holes were in coverage, and if there was a hole, Goff was finding a way to take advantage of it. So there was that. They also schemed guys open. They motioned guys to a lot of stack alignments, and they sort of exploited our banjo coverage rules, where one guy would release inside and kind of give like a soft, it'd be kind of somebody would streak vertical. The outside receiver, it would be like a switch release where the outside receiver would release inside and then go vertical, and that would allow the inside slot receiver underneath on the stack to release outside and then like come over on a basically set up natural picks basically to get guys open and get guys leverage for the way they need to succeed on those routes. So some smart things they were doing in the passing game. They got a couple explosives in the run game. Guys just lost contain. The Lions got, I mean, up there weren't a lot of good runs up the middle. I can think of maybe one where Kyrie's Tonga, who has continued to play very well, but kind of like penetrated, and that kind of allowed a rushing lane up the middle. But having Dalvin Tomlinson back made a huge difference. Having Harrison Phillips back, so overall, I think it's funny they keep taking more and more resources away from the run defense and giving more and more resources to the pass coverage, and the run defense is only staying good, and the pass defense keeps like
Yeah.
shooting itself in the foot. The other thing I would say is, Ben Johnson just called a very good game and did a lot of really cool things with his play sequencing. Where, on that first drive, on in the third quarter when the Lions got the ball, they pitched the ball three times in a row almost. But on the third time there was a fake pitch, so by that time, the Vikings linebackers were rearing to bite on the pitch to chase. I mean, pitch the ball. That's as much of a stretch play as you get because the linebackers really have to chase it down. it was all setting up, the slant on the backside to the slot receiver where the safety's capping him because the Vikings like to run quarters coverage. So, just like an easy pitch and catch touchdown, and then everybody saw, how they set up Penei Sewell. Penei Sewell was aligned as sort of a wide receiver on the first snap, and he motioned across the formation on the second snap. He lines up as an inline tight end, and then on the third play, he lines up as a tight end again, motions across. But then by that point, nobody's paying attention to him because 2 plays they've run duo now with him as an eligible receiver. That's the play they set him up in the flat, and that's how he gets wide open because by that point they've been kind of lulled to sleep. So that's all to say. I think Ben Johnson called a really good game, and I think the Vikings played poorly on top of it. So, anytime when you've got 50% Duke Shelley snaps, bad things tend to happen too. I like Duke Shelley, but yeah, he's a little bit in deep water when it comes to playing all these starting snaps too. So especially on the outside, he's been traditionally a slot corner. So I'm surprised how much outside boundary coverage he's getting. Do you have anything you want to layer on top of that other than we suck and the Lions are really smart?
Yeah, I think there's a couple interesting things to go in here too, right? Like execution errors. I think you talked about. It's not only that the defenders aren't in the right spots. It's sometimes they're not able to execute, more man-like coverages, right? You talked about Duke Shelley. He lost on an in-breaking route. He's lost on a couple routes. Cameron Dantzler obviously lost pretty bad on that big touchdown he let up. There was another play where Patrick Peterson let up a big gain to DJ Chark, probably an 18-yard or so gain on an out route where, he's playing, mod coverage, I think, to the quarters side, and he just gets beat outside, and that's not something you can have happen if you're Patrick Peterson. Now, Peterson's played pretty well this year, so I don't want to take that, singular play as an example of him getting beat, but it was consistent plays like that throughout the game, and then it was also spacing issues in zone coverage, and we've been talking about this all season, right? I can go back to the first Packers game where we were really struggling to cover the things that were going in the flat, and that followed through to the Eagles game, right? But now, really, and recently, I think it's been even worse stuff, which is the stuff over the middle, above the linebacker level, but in front of the safety level, right? That's really where we're seeing opposing defenses be able to attack this offense. And, part of it we've talked about, Cam Bynum has been playing too deep. Part of it we kind of talked about last week, and I kind of theorized that the linebackers are being sucked up too much by play action. We're the worst play action defense in the NFL, and we were the best play action defense in the NFL last year. Like, I don't think this is an Eric Kendricks trait. I think it's more how Eric Kendricks is being coached, right? And we're talking about the players not being able to execute successfully. I think that does kind of lie on the coaching staff just in terms of how they're teaching things and how they're trying to get the defensive players to communicate, because it's clearly not working on this defense as we keep letting up explosive pass plays week after week after week. And that's what this defense is supposed to prevent, right? It's supposed to prevent those explosive plays. It's supposed to prevent the opponent from being able to consistently pass the ball on you. We're supposed to be dedicating extra resources in coverage. And I don't think I do think we do have some weak links in terms of personnel. I think Cam Bynum has not been playing great recently. I think Chandon Sullivan has not been playing great all year. I think Jordan Hicks in coverage in particular has not been playing great all year. But Eric Kendricks, I think, also hasn't really been playing all that well in coverage all year, and we know he's really good at coverage, right? That's something we know he should be really good at. I don't think athletically he's lost a step. I think the positions the defense has been putting him in have been problematic for him. We know Harrison Smith is a really good safety, right? He's a really cerebral, really smart safety. That doesn't and we're still not, obviously he was out for this game, but we're still not succeeding with him in on defense, right, when he's been playing this season. So I do think, and Patrick Peterson obviously is an incredibly smart corner, right? Like, with those pieces, we should be able to communicate and do a good enough job and kind of patch over the holes that we have at other places in the roster, but we just simply haven't been able to do that this season. And that's a big concern, and that goes back to coaching for me. Now, we're both people who are not in the room, right? So we can't say how this defense is being taught, how these coverages are being taught, what the coaching points for the players are. And it could be that they're just, not teaching those in a way that the players are fully grasping. It could be that the players are taking those and not actually taking the right things from those coaching points. But there's some sort of disconnect between what the players are doing and physically executing on the field and what theoretically should be happening in good versions of this Fangio, Brandon Staley, the Fangio defense that's proliferated across the NFL that Ed Donatel was his top lieutenant for a long time, right? This is a very successful defense. The scheme, quote unquote, the overarching scheme, I think is good, right? The plays he's calling are good. The structures of the coverages are good. They're just not being executed appropriately by the defense. And I think that lies on both the players and the coaching staff.
I think it's interesting talking about the defense and who's executing well and who seems to be coached well. Because when I look at the defensive line, particularly interior defensive line, everybody seems to be extremely well coached, and I think that's why you're seeing a lot of even like the backups have very impressive seasons. I mean, I mentioned Kyrie's Tonga, who 95, who's just every single game I've watched since we plucked him off the Falcons practice squad halfway through the season has been like, this dude is a really good nose guard. He looks like an above average starting caliber nose guard. The way he's just consistently able to lock, peek, shed, play a gap over, make plays a gap over, walk guys back in the passing game. You can say the same that James Lynch has had a lot of really impressive reps. And kind of everybody, Dalvin Tomlinson and Harrison Phillips are setting the standard. But I think pretty much everybody on the interior defensive line is playing very well. And I think it's not really a coincidence that, when we hired Ed Donatel, when we hired Mike Pettin, we brought the first two guys we brought in were Chris Rumpf and Mike Smith. Chris Rumpf, our Vikings interior defensive line coach, and Mike Smith, the outside pass rusher. You talk about the pass rushers. We've seen a lot of development from DJ Wanham, from Patrick Jones. Darius Smith leads the NFL in pressures. Danielle Hunter is 10th. They're both top 15 graded edge defenders. I know it doesn't feel like it, but they're playing very well, I think, and I feel like especially the interior defensive line coaches. So I feel like I think what you're starting to see, if I can tie this to a thesis, is Ed Donatel was the DB's coach who would be there installing a lot of the secondary play when he was with Vic Fangio. Now that he's been promoted to be the scheme guy on top and not necessarily in charge, he kind of had to hire his own Durante Jones. They kind of plucked off at the last second, and Greg Minuski is their inside linebackers coach. Guys who are just kind of these were the last coaches they hired, and I think they kind of really wanted Mike Smith with a bullet, and they really wanted to bring him over. They really wanted to get Chris Rumpf in. They really believed in these guys as coaches, but it was not to necessarily dig on Durante Jones or Greg Minuski, but I think it's pretty clear those two coaches have not done quite as good of a job, and maybe it's because they aren't quite as familiar with Mike Pettin and the rest of the team, and they don't have the same level of camaraderie. But I think when we talk about what are the coaching failures that, because it's not just Harrison's, Eric Kendricks didn't just forget how to play football or anything. It has to be there at some point. There has to be, if people don't know the scheme and aren't able to execute the scheme, maybe that's on the players, but it's probably more likely some sort of communication breakdown from the coaches to the players. So I feel like maybe they would do better to find maybe a better fit, for the safeties coach, for the cornerbacks coach, for the inside linebackers coach, because right now that's where you're seeing a lot of the breakdowns. That's where you're seeing a lot of the miscommunications. And I don't think it's a coincidence that that was the job that Donatel used to have when he was Fangio's lieutenant, but now he's promoted out of it, and they kind of scrambled to find guys to do it. So I feel like when we talk about is coaching a problem, that's where I feel like there's probably a little bit of room for improvement. And I don't know if it would be another year with these guys where they have a little bit more familiarity with the Fangio system, or if it's a matter of finding new guys. I definitely feel like we found something in Chris Rumpf and Mike Smith. But for the back seven coaches, I think that's where there's been a lot of issues too. So that goes to Donald too, not to absolve him, but it's an execution problem, but you can still pin that on the coaches, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's a pretty decent theory. Obviously, with neither of us being in the room, we can't know for sure in any scenario, and it's hard to call for guys' jobs and guys' heads when you're just kind of making some guesswork from the outside. So I don't think that, I definitely don't want to call for any individual's heads. Obviously something needs to be fixed. Obviously they need to self-evaluate in the building and figure out what that problem is and try to resolve it the best way that they can, whether that's bringing somebody else in or what have you. but I think that necessarily saying, and the fan base is going pretty wild saying fire Ed Donatel right now. I don't think that automatically solves your issue, right? Because the first question after that happens is who do we bring in besides him? But a couple other things I wanted to hit from this game real quick, and you mentioned the performance of the defensive line. I thought the performance of the defensive line was great in this game. I thought that the Vikings, and this is a very other than that Mrs. Lincoln kind of statement, but I thought the Vikings, outside of those two big touchdowns that they allowed in the first half, actually played very solid defense in the first half. They were extremely effective against the run. If you discount that 42-yard run on the fake play from the Lions stats, I believe the Lions rushed 29 times for 90-something yards. That's just over 3 yards a carry, right? That's not a very effective run game. And as you mentioned, the Vikings defense is playing a man down in the box consistently. That's how we structure our defense. They did a very good job limiting the Lions' run game. Now, on the
Which is a
passing
very
side
good
of
run
things,
game. Like one of the best coached run games, one of the most
yes.
diverse run games, and one of the best run blocking offensive lines. So that was really, especially considering quality of opponent, impressive stuff in the run defense.
Yeah, it was really impressive stuff from the run defense. And then on the pass side, I thought they consistently harassed Jared Goff in the first half. Now, that consistent harassment did not lead to any sort of pass rush production at all, because typically the coverage was so bad on the back end that the Vikings were just allowing completions left and right. It was pretty frustrating to me as I was watching the game to consistently see guys beating it. And Zadarius Smith was a huge one. He had 5 clean wins against interior offensive linemen or interior blocking. One was against a running back where he got pressure almost immediately on Jared Goff. It's like he just sidesteps a guy. He's quick around him and he beats him. And it was against Frank Ragnow and Jonah Jackson too, who are two of the better players at their positions in the league. In true dropbacks from the Lions, which I counted as not screens, they had, I believe, 34 true dropbacks. The Vikings had a guy beat their opponent or had a free rusher on 11 of those snaps, right? So they were getting pretty immediate pressure pretty consistently through the game, and I think the defensive line should be commended for that. The problem was the Lions still had a successful completion on 6 of those 11 plays. So even though, and I did it by Football Outsiders success rate definition, but the majority of those 6 plays went for first downs, right? They were big plays because the coverage was so bad that Jared Goff was able to get the ball out so quickly and just release the ball or start his throwing motion as soon as he hits the top of his drop. And when that's the case, you simply can't make a play as a defensive line, right? It's not that Danielle Hunter and Zadarius Smith have disappeared. They're winning pass rush reps. They're winning run defense reps pretty dominantly. We saw that, particularly Hunter in run defense and Zadarius in pass rush, right? They're both winning pretty dominantly in that area, and we saw that bear out in the run game, but we didn't see it bear out in the pass game because of the lack of coverage.
Yeah. So it's very frustrating because they're wasting a very, very talented defensive line. I feel like this is one of the more talented Vikings defensive lines since I've been, writing about the Vikings. Zadarius Smith and Danielle Hunter are, in the, kind of that elite tier of pass rush duos, and then Dalvin Tomlinson and Harrison Phillips, especially with Dalvin Tomlinson back, it makes such a difference because he's not just really good playing multiple gaps or a gap and a half in the run game, but he's also an extremely effective pass rusher. And you had DJ Wanham, who has a lot of really effect. I mean, there are a lot of reps in there where Wanham's rushing from the outside and he has the most impressive rush of anybody, or he's the quickest to beat his guy on the outside. So it's a really talented front line, and that usually is enough to put together a good defense. And maybe we shouldn't pick on them too much because one, this was a really this was like the Sean McVay pantsing of Mike Zimmer back in 2019 or whatever that was, like just an extremely well called game where they kind of knew how to set the Vikings up to break their own rules. So one, you have to tip your cap, and two, despite the Vikings giving up a lot of yards in the past few weeks and being 32nd in the league, dead last in yards allowed, they are 15th in EPA per play. That's actually an above average defense by EPA per play, which factors in the fact that this defense generates a lot of sacks and turnovers and interceptions, and it gives up a lot of yards, but it's kind of bend but no break. They tend to hunker down a little bit in the red zone. So you do have to factor all that into. In fact, the defensive efficiency is 15th. The offensive efficiency is 18th. I feel like we spend a lot of time talking about like, oh man, this offense is incredible, and if only we had fired at Donatello, how much better could we be? Well, um, if you look at Kirk Cousins' efficiency metrics, I feel like the defense is actually a little bit better than the offense. So that's maybe we shouldn't pick on them too much, but yeah, I mean, especially after you see Jared Goff give up this many yards, I think it is fair to ask like, what the heck is going on? And really, it's the back seven just is not executing and doesn't seem to really know what they're doing, which is disheartening, especially this late in the season to see. So hopefully they have a chance to clean it up against what should probably be a much less challenging opponent in
Yes.
Matt Ryan. We'll see the Colts in a little bit.
Yeah. So I think that pretty much wraps it up on defense. We've gotten into a couple of good theories, I think, on why the defense is struggling so much. And it mostly has to do with that back seven. Why don't we flip it over to the offensive side of the ball? And I think the number one topic on offense for everybody coming out of this game should be Justin Jefferson, right? He had another incredible football game, 11 catches for, I believe, 227 yards. Should have had about 30 more yards had the ref not whistled a play dead. Where it looks, I can see where the ref saw him step out of bounds, but that's something you should let the play run and then figure it out later, right? Like, we've got so many camera angles to tell whether or not he stepped out of bounds. If he scores a touchdown on the play, like, we're not going to worry about whether or not they get that right upon review, right? They're going to be able to get that pretty clearly right. So don't blow the play dead and kill a potential touchdown because I believe the 227 yards was a Vikings regular season record, which is like the official single game record, but Anthony Carter had more yards in a playoff game back in 1987. So he doesn't have the Vikings, but playoff inclusive franchise record for single game receiving yards, which is a little bit annoying. But like, he's just dusting dudes all over the field. He can't even be double covered. Like, there are reps where the Lions really have two players bracketing him to either direction and a safety over top of him in coverage, and he just finds holes in that area and is able to make plays consistently. And even on plays where he doesn't get targeted, like the second or third pass play of the game, he absolutely roasts Jeff Okudah off the line, gets wide open. It was the incompletion to TJ Hawkinson over the middle where a linebacker actually made a pretty good play. I don't blame Kirk for making that throw. That was the correct throw based on the read. But Justin Jefferson gets wide open immediately against press coverage. It's just absolutely crazy the level he's playing at right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's really crazy. Like, Jefferson, the Lions play some of the most man-heavy defenses. They really want to play press man coverage and across the line, and they want to like double Justin Jefferson or roll a safety over the top. Jefferson had 15 targets, 11 catches on 15 targets. Only one of them was contested. That's how open he was getting, and that's against press man. That is very hard to do. Like, you basically have to just dust your guy 10 out of your 11 targets or whatever to accomplish that. So that if there's a silver lining, Justin Jefferson's back on pace. He's at 1,500 yards, which is insane because we still have a quarter of the season to go. He's got a chance to officially be JJ2K and hit 2,000. So really, really impressive game from him, and I think an even more encouraging game from Kirk Cousins because, in my opinion, I don't know if you agree, but in my opinion, this was Kirk's best game of the year. He was very aggressive downfield. He was declining underneath shots to push the ball down the field. He was throwing. This was the first game I felt that Kirk Cousins' elite accuracy. That's kind of the characteristic that I so strongly associate with Kirk more than anything else. I feel like you really saw that in this game. There were a lot of really pinpoint throws, not just catchable, but like right in front of guys' faces or leading guys, with right in front of their leverage or whatever. So a lot of really impressive throws. He was able to continue to push the ball. There were a lot of third down conversions, even a couple that were dropped that probably TJ Hawkinson had either a drop and then that contested catch you kind of mentioned early on where the linebacker kind of got into the catch point a little bit. So I thought this was a really impressive game. I thought his pocket presence was good. So I thought, yeah, this was really encouraging stuff. This is the kind of the Kirk Cousins I was hoping to see. And if we see a little bit more of that, this is the Kirk Cousins that we get moving forward. This isn't the defense we get moving forward. We get a little bit more of the defense that got it to rank 15th in EPA per play rather than giving up all the yards in the world. that's a recipe to win, between Kirk Cousins, Justin Jefferson, and some tweaks on defense. So that much was encouraging, despite the fact that this was, a 10-point loss.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I think this was Kirk's best game of the season. The sacks he took were pretty unavoidable in my eyes. He was making a lot of plays under duress, kind of with trash in front of him, with people with muddy pockets, right, where he had to move around and make the best of it. He consistently pushed the ball down the field. Like you said, I think there were even more third down conversions. Like the third down conversions that we failed to convert, I really don't think were Kirk Cousins' fault at all. By and large. So, you have that TJ Hawkinson drop. It was like a 9-yard out. Kirk makes a great throw. It's right there on the sideline. It's just kind of a concentration thing. He drops it. The contested catch, I think the linebacker really just made a great play on that. Like, he worked through another receiver, I think it was KJ Osborne, to come and kind of impact TJ Hawkinson. The Justin Jefferson catch that was short, that was clearly short. I honestly, I don't understand why Kevin O'Connell challenged that. Like, to me, that was short all the way. He wasn't touched. He came back of his own volition, right? So that throw, I think maybe could have been a little bit better, because the throw is what brought Justin Jefferson back across. But really, it's a situation where you're kind of expecting to get a first down out of that play, right? If the defensive back is closer, that's a first down because he touches Jefferson right away. And by the time he touches Jefferson, Jefferson's past the first down marker. You know what I mean? So it's like, maybe if Justin Jefferson wins a little bit less on his route, then you have a first down, and we're not talking about it as a point of discussion here. But I totally agree with you. I thought Kirk had his best game of the season. If we flip it over to the running game, I think the running game had its worst game of the season, right? And part of this, I think, is the resources the Lions dedicated. Playing man coverage a lot, they ended up, and I think there were some interesting decisions from the Vikings offense, especially early on. This is a Kevin O'Connell thing. This is a Sean McVay thing. They like to bring wide receivers into the box to, help block, help with those numbers. But what was happening in this case is, because they were bringing the receivers into the box and the Lions were playing so much man, it just added an extra defensive back, and it added an extra player that they needed to block to the box. And it became really difficult for them to match up against all of these defenders. Like, most of the runs I saw from the Vikings, the Lions had 8 defenders in the box, and if 1 or 2 blocks fail at that point, we were getting free runners at the running back, right, at Dalvin Cook. So, in those cases, we were condensing the formation, and it was hurting us because the Lions were stuffing the box so much with man coverage defenders, who then also were able to help in their run responsibilities. I thought, obviously, with a couple backups on the offensive line, the run blocking in general wasn't great. There were instances of the offensive linemen losing, and that led to negative plays and that sort of thing. And there just wasn't the room for explosive plays, because when you have those 8 defenders in the box, part of the hope is you can get big explosive plays because it gets so wadded up. If it gets blocked up perfectly and the running back gets loose, there's nobody really to stop them. But the Vikings weren't able to block anything perfectly in this game, so they never ended up getting there.
Yeah, pretty disappointing, especially, last week I think I mentioned Vikings are the second highest run block grade team in the NFL. And then I think the Lions were schematically smart to kind of sell out a little bit to slow down this run game, because it led to basically zero production, including the fumbled pop pass that it was sort of the wide delay that they were trying to do. I don't think that's a bad call, especially considering they practiced it. But Ed Ingram just gets blown up, and
Yep.
they allow immediate pressure in. So a lot of failures on the blocking. Will be great to get Bradbury back for Schlottman. Will be very, very great to get Darrisaw back for Blake Brandell. Unfortunately, Brandell is on injured reserve now. Got banged up in the game. I certainly don't want Oli Udoh out there because he doesn't. I feel like he's not like a wing tackle, like you can just kind of get by with him. You kind of have to go into panic mode a little bit with Udo a little bit. So, but Darius, that'll be a huge upgrade. So if there's a silver lining there, it's that the cavalry is on the way. But yeah, this was you were right to say it was not like efficiency wise. This was the worst run game, even if you take out the fumble that they lost. Fumble luck coming back to bite them. They had 2 fumbles and they lost both of them. But even if you take that out, just averaging less than 2 yards per carry is not gonna get it done. So Disappointing stuff from the run game, and and from Dalvin too. Even if everybody gets beat up, it's on him to not fumble the ball. That's especially on a low
Yeah.
red zone goal line run, take care of the ball. That's priority number one. So I get it's a little tricky when you're also thinking maybe passing the ball, becoming a passer, but yeah, disappointing game from Dalvin too. So hopefully they can bounce back against the Colts.
Yeah, absolutely, and hopefully getting Christian Darrisaw back will be a huge help to that if we're able to do that. Obviously, Garrett Bradbury as well. I didn't think Austin Schlottman was disastrous in this game, but I think it was clearly a downgrade from what we'd gotten from Bradbury previously. I do want to flip it over now to a talker that I think people were more interested immediately after the game before they got really mad at Ed Donatel, just for the abysmal defensive performance right in this game, which was Kevin O'Connell's decision making. He made some interesting decisions, or I would say decisions that traditional football minds, kind of like to rally against. So he went for a fourth down, and it was fourth and a long one early in the game that the Vikings didn't end up convert. They ended up running. I didn't love the play call there because I thought that play call was more of a fourth and inches kind of play call, and they got inches on the play, but they needed like a yard and a half, and they just weren't able to get the push up front with that blocking. The Dalvin pop pass we kind of mentioned a little bit. Like, I agree with you. I like the play call as well. It just wasn't executed well. I think that's a reasonable thing to do down in that area. You just need to execute, and you certainly need to not fumble on the play. Like, that made it into a disaster. And then there were two decisions that he had to go for two. The first one is an analytically correct decision to go for two down 14. I was a little bit surprised at how early he did it, given that it was still the end of the third quarter, I believe, when he did that. But that is the correct decision, and we can explain that a little bit later. I was shocked that he didn't go for two when he was down 9 when we scored that final touchdown that we scored. I just didn't really understand why he wouldn't do that, because I obviously, like, you're going to have to go for two at some point, and having the knowledge of whether or not you made your 2-point conversion attempt is important in your later game decision making, right? Because if you fail that 2-point conversion, you're gonna need 9 points, right? You can kick the extra point, get within 8 points, you score a touchdown with 0 seconds left, you have a 2-point conversion to tie to the game. If you make the 2-point conversion, all you need to do is kick an extra point with 0 seconds left. Or if you miss the 2-point conversion earlier on, you can, you need 2 scores, right? You're guaranteed to need 2 scores. So you can do something like kick an early field goal and then take an onside kick and try to score a Hail Mary touchdown or something like that. So I didn't understand why he didn't go for 2 later. I agree with the decision to go for 2 earlier on when we were down 14. Any thoughts from you on that, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's the analytically sound thing to do, but then to do it on the first chance and then have the second chance and decline to do it was strange. It's funny. Like, Kevin O'Connell got a lot of praise from the analytics nerds on Twitter for the first decision, and then I didn't see the criticism for the second one, which was probably even more egregious than the first one. So, I think it's the right decision to go for it. Especially with a kicker that has missed a few extra points, some very notable ones in past games. So that affects the math as well. But even if you've got a kicker who makes every single extra point guaranteed, these are still situations where you improve your win probability going for 2 because you expand your ability to make it a 1-score game or to win in regulation. So it makes sense, but yeah, it was strange that he went away from it. I guess maybe he wasn't confident in the play call, but I don't like going by feels when the math tells you math should take priority, in my opinion, in your decision making matrix over feelings. So that's my feelings on it.
I mean, you should have multiple 2-point plays going into a game, right? You should have multiple plays that you prepared
Low red zone
pre-game.
master, come on! You think Kevin O'Connell's run out of low red zone plays? I don't think so.
No, I really, really do not. So yeah, I think that overall covers generally the offense and defense. Let's jump into tape talk. I think we're going to go for a little bit shorter tape talk this week, and just to cover the 2 big plays, the 2 big touchdowns that the Lions had, right? So the first one was the Jameson Williams touchdown, Jameson Williams' first career catch. So to set it up, it's a play action play by the Lions, and they're running two main routes. One's an over stop from the other side of the field, and then there's a post from Jamison Williams on top of that. So what that over motion does is it draws Cam Bynum forward. I think Kevin O'Connell in his press conference said Cam Bynum got nailed down, and that means that in that quarter's coverage, when you see a player coming across on that deep over across the field, your safety to the opposite side, we've called it a poach safety in the past, that sort of thing, is supposed to nail the crosser. He's supposed to go down and kind of hit it like he's a hammer hitting a nail, right? Hit that player hard in the back and try to disrupt a catch. That's what Cam Bynum tries to do. It leaves Jamison Williams wide open, nobody within yards of him. It might be on Cam Bynum here. I think the consensus is probably that it is on Cam Bynum. Josh Metellus makes a really interesting decision on the play. Like Kevin O'Connell's references this as part quarters or quarters. Josh Metellus bites on the run fake really hard, and then he covers a running back releasing into the flat with a linebacker, Eric Kendricks, on the play. So we had two players in coverage on that. I think that is wrong. I don't think that Josh Metellus should have been there. I don't know if Josh Metellus should have had a deep quarter where he falls off and catches Jamison Williams deep. To me, it would make more sense for Josh Metellus to be the one who takes that over stop route and Cam Bynum runs with the deep post, but I'm not totally sure. It could also be Patrick Peterson, who was over that over stop route and looked like he was going to fall off to the deep post to Jamison Williams, but he got but when the over turned into a stop, he hesitated for a second and kind of drove on that, maybe thinking Goff was going to throw that. So it's a little bit confusing to me, Nick. I don't know if you have anything better to parse that.
It's kind of funny because Kevin O'Connell told us it was quarters, so you'd think we'd be able to figure out whose fault it is knowing the play call. But there's a lot of different ways you can play quarters. I'm inclined to think it's Bynum just because they asked Metellus too about it, and Metellus very confidently said no, I was supposed to buzz to the flat, cover the running back. That was my job. I did my job. I can't speak to anybody else, which is Metellus plays with that same level of confidence.
Yes, he
confidently
does.
Incorrect sometimes, but I like the confidence. Got to have that in the DB. So. It could be Metellus. I shouldn't do this, but I'm inclined to say Patrick Peterson was supposed to stop on the guy who was covered on that bit route in the middle of the field rather than carry Jamison Williams up top, just because it's Patrick Peterson and
Sure.
there are mental mistakes going on. I'm going to. It's probably not Patrick Peterson making the mental mistake. It's possible. I don't know. But yeah, I'm inclined to think Bynum kind of just. He opened his hips a little bit, and I think he had his back a little bit to Jamison Williams behind him, and I think he kind of just lost track that there was a post route going over the top of them. And so, when he saw Goff cock his arm back to throw it, he just sort of, instinctually went with the underneath route, not realizing there was something going right behind him. So that's my guess, but, like I said, could be completely wrong. So I don't want to speculate too confidently.
Yeah, so I think it's one that's up for a lot of speculation, but I think that's a pretty good point. I had missed that Metellus said that he was supposed to buzz to the flat. If that's the case, I do think based on the rules, like Peterson playing, in a quarters coverage, man outside and deep, after a certain point, you just have to take that guy, right? Even if he breaks inside. So it very well could be Bynum's fault. On the other one, the DJ Shark touchdown, we were in... And correct me if I'm wrong on this. We were in cover 3, right? And Dantzler just kind of got beat deep.
Yeah.
So yeah, that one to me is more on Cameron Dantzler's, recovery from his high ankle sprain and just his athleticism not being all the way there to be able to carry DJ Shark deep. He kind of hesitates a little bit as Shark goes to the deep route, a little bit of a double move or a little bit of a potential to break somewhere else. And Shark just gets by him and, outruns him for the touchdown. It was a pretty well thrown ball by Goff. But at the end of the day, that one you can just chalk up as a loss to Cameron Dantzler one-on-one.
Yeah, and it was a nice throw, too. I mean, Dantzler should not let himself get stacked like that, should not get beat like that. He was a little slow to turn his hips upfield. Got to know that, especially against a big and tall and very fast Well, not super fast, but fast enough vertical threat in DJ Chark. So, I mean, I've been pounding that drum that like this defense can get attacked vertically. We finally saw it happen in this game for two huge explosive vertical touchdowns. So that's really disappointing to see from Dantzler. Obviously, that was a player we were kind of hoping would take a leap forward. Maybe he's still not completely healthy. Maybe that played a role in it. But I mean, it was cover nine, and it was just his job. Cover three basically, and safety weak rotated to cover three, and it was just his job. He was one on one with Chark, just gets beat. And credit to Goff, that was a really nice throw too. That,
Hmm.
but you can't let yourself get stacked and let yourself get beaten that cleanly. So, um, because you'll pay for it with a very very bad play result. So that was disappointing to see.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I think that pretty much covers it from the Lions game. Obviously, we've hit the two big ticket items, which are like, what is wrong with the Vikings defense? Like, how can we get this fixed? Who should we fire, right, to solve this problem? And then Justin Jefferson just being an absolute superstar in the NFL. So why don't we flip it over and head to our preview of the Indianapolis Colts? We play them Saturday at 1 my time, noon for most Minnesota Vikings fans, right? And we are playing Jeff Saturday on Saturday. You kind of have to make that pun given this game. The Jeff Saturday hire is an interesting one, and I think it's just worth discussing a little bit, right? Kind of totally out of left field for the Colts to hire him as their interim head coach. I guess he'd done some sort of consulting work with them during the season, a little bit of film watching, but it really is interesting to see them just hire a guy who's a leader, right? Who doesn't have kind of, and obviously he's an NFL, longtime NFL player, like a center, a very smart guy, but he's not ingrained in the coaching methods that the Colts have had, right? So he has to rely on the other members of the staff to just continue doing what they were doing, and they weren't doing that very effectively, right, up until Jeff Saturday's hiring. And it's been interesting. They came out and played hard their first game. They've been competitive in a couple other games. We keep having these Colts primetime games. It seems like it was like the Broncos early in the season we were cursed with on primetime, and now it's the Colts we're cursed with watching on our TV, like once a week just because it's the only football game that's on. But he's made some questionable decisions when it comes to fourth down decision making and 2-minute drills and that sort of thing. What do you think of Jeff Saturday overall, and just kind of the hire there, Nick?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like the Colts are one of the more poorly run organizations.
Sure.
I mean, well, I should say from the ownership. I feel like Ballard is
Yes.
is a good GM or whatever, but from the ownership, Ursay kind of just makes it a little bit of a mess. And um, ever since kind of Luck left them, or Luck retired early, they've kind of just been on a bit of a lurch trying to find. They've um, did a great job for a while, like building up a very talented roster. But I don't really get the Jeff Saturday hire. I don't know if this is just hire somebody as like the fall guy so that you can start from a clean slate, and start over with an actual real search next year, or um, just hey, if you go completely out of left, like Sean McVay was kind of a completely out of left field hire. I mean, it was very highly, high reputation, but he was also like 32 years old when they hired him. So if there's something to be said for trying to be different rather than copying what everybody else has done. But that said, I just Jeff Saturday does not like have like the bona fides to be a quality NFL coach, and I feel like I mean he played in the NFL, but like in terms of actual coaching experience, I would want somebody who's actually kind of qualified for the job in terms of has lots of NFL actual coaching experience, or if he's young, has play calling experience as an offensive play caller, defensive play caller, or something. So Saturday is not that. So kind of a perplexing decision, but at the same time, the Colts have sometimes shown some signs of life under Saturday that they didn't previously. So I don't know. I feel like they're a bit of a mess, but part of that is not just because of the coaching. Although it has sometimes been, just with like game management stuff with Saturday, but like also just Matt Ryan, his arm is shot, and that is problematic. And the offense around him is not as good as we thought it might be coming into the year. So they're just, despite having, I think, a very high performing and very talented defense, they're just kind of in a little bit of a mess. Will be interesting to see how they match up with the Vikings in Minnesota.
Yeah, and let's talk about that offense a little bit. Obviously, you mentioned Matt Ryan. I don't think that Matt Ryan, well, statistically, obviously, Matt Ryan's playing the worst football of his career. I don't think that Matt Ryan is totally cooked, but what I do think from seeing the Colts is that offensive line is atrocious. And if you look at the stats, I think that backs it up pretty well. The Colts' run game last year was by far the best run game in terms of EPA per play. The Colts were a middle of the pack passing offense last season, which is still pretty good, and their run game had a better EPA per play than their passing game. That's like unheard of outside of situations where the passing game is just absolutely atrocious, right? Like their passing game was pretty good, it was solid, and their run game was just that much better. Which is crazy. I think they had something like 0.63 EPA per play. The next best team was zero point 0.2 something. So just a crazy good run game. This year they rank 32nd in EPA per play in the run game. And Jonathan Taylor has had some injuries. You know, they've shuffled through backs a little bit there, but I think that's very clearly not because Jonathan Taylor was the best running back in the NFL last year and is suddenly the worst running back in the NFL this year, right? I think that's pretty clearly because the offensive line has deteriorated to the point where it's not tenable as a unit that you can have in front of you. It's also happened to Matt Ryan. He has the highest sack rate in his career this year, and his sack rate had been going up with the Falcons over the past couple of years, but he's getting sacked on 7.6% of snaps. He's fourth in the NFL in sacks taken with 38 so far this season, right? So that offensive line performance in both the passing game and the rushing game is a problem. Now, we've talked about how the Vikings pass rush has been really good, even against a good offensive line in the Detroit Lions. I'm hoping that they can feast against the Indianapolis Colts, but them being able to feast is contingent on coverage being good, right? Because Matt Ryan, I think, can still process things quickly, get the ball out, and the Colts do have some weapons on offense. I don't think the Colts' weapons are to the level that the Lions' weapons are, right? Michael Pittman still is a pretty good player. He's probably a fringe number one wide receiver in the NFL. Paris Campbell is very fast and kind of electric with the ball in his hands. He's been pretty healthy this year, despite dealing with injuries in his first couple seasons in the NFL, or first 3 seasons, I think, really, in the NFL. And Alec Pierce has kind of emerged as a big play threat there too. So it'll be interesting to see how the Vikings are able to match up against the Colts. Obviously, the Vikings defense has been terrible recently, but I'm hoping that the lack of an offensive line, the lack of a potential run game because of that lack of an offensive line will lead them to just, shore up the pass defense a little bit. They've been beaten up by teams 3 weeks in a row in the pass game, or 4 weeks in a row, really, 4 games in a row from the Cowboys game to now. So I'm hoping that they'll be able to shore it up. I went a little bit long there, Nick, but any additional thoughts on the Colts offense?
Yeah, I don't think it's very talented, and that's always dangerous to say because I said that about the Lions too. Of course, I didn't realize how well coached the Lions are, but
Well,
I
well.
don't
To
think
be
they're
fair to
very
you,
talented.
we were talking about how the Lions' defense wasn't talented, and the Lions' defense wasn't good at all in the game against us. So we
That's
had
true.
that going
That's
for
true.
us.
Yeah, we gave some credence to their offensive line and Amon-Ra St. Brown and Goff when you keep them clean. But in any case, with the Colts, um, like Pittman, I think you're right to call him a 1B type wide receiver one. He's kind of like a discount. I want to say like Mike Evans, but maybe like a Drake London type where he's like big, but he's still able to get open despite his size. And he's good at the catch point like you would expect from a bigger receiver, and he's sneaky good after the catch. So he's like a legit weapon you have to worry about. I'm not so worried about Alec Pierce. Paris Campbell, I'm not. I mean, yes, he's fast, but I'm not terribly worried about him as he's not like an elite. He's like a wide receiver 3. He's kind of their slot guy. So Jonathan Taylor, obviously a really good back, but like you said, banged up, and this year they are surprisingly dead last in the league in EPA per play on runs, and they aren't very good at EPA per. The passing efficiency is bad too. Matt Ryan leads the NFL in interceptions by a fair amount. He's second in the NFL in turnover-worthy play percentage behind only Justin Fields, and that's just because Justin Fields fumbles a lot because of the nature of him as a running quarterback, and because he holds on to the ball a lot, dropping back. But Matt Ryan throws a lot of interceptions because he doesn't have the arm he used to, and he never had a great arm, but he doesn't have the arm he used to. So his ball floats on him a lot. So I feel like this is a game where you could see a lot of interception production from the Vikings because when you're playing guys like Josh Allen, zone defense isn't going to cut it because he will rifle the ball into, the soft spots and the zones where you think, oh well, I can cover that guy because I can get to him by the time the ball gets there. Like you can't do that against the big arms. But with Matt Ryan, there's those balls float a little bit more, so you have a little bit more space to catch up to the ball. So I feel like the team that's it was once a good rush. I mean, they still have Quentin Nelson, who's having a bit of a down season a little bit, but they have the potential to be a good run team. But this is the game where the Vikings' philosophy of play a gap down in the run game and have a lot of too high coverages that allow guys to be there and in position to make plays on the ball with their eyes on the quarterback. I feel like this is sort of the ideal game where you would circle it and hope this is the game where guys can start to get some of that interception production. And I also feel like it helps a lot that playing against Matt Ryan is still just as smart as ever, still has very good pocket presence, despite all the sacks and stuff that his offensive line kind of leaving him dry. But I feel like this is kind of a game where the Vikings style of defense, zone heavy, tries to bend but no break, tries to generate turnovers, wants teams to just run it back and take the cheese and take the easy plays, and wants to play down in the run game so that they can have that numbers advantage. One, to generate turnovers, but also to take things away in the passing game. I feel like that matches up very well with this Colts offense. So I feel pretty confident that the Vikings have the advantage here on defense.
Yeah, I agree with you. We've talked about how the Vikings defense isn't great. Colts offense, 32nd in the league in DVOA, 32nd in the league, I believe, in EPA per play. They're right down there with the Texans. If they're not 32nd, they're 31st. So it really is a struggling unit, and hopefully we can take advantage of that. And on the flip side of the ball, I think the Vikings offense will be able to score points. We typically put up about 20-something points per game, and I think that'll continue. And if that's the case, I think we'll be able to hold the Colts into the teens on the defensive side of the ball as well. So the Colts have had, we've alluded to it, they've had a solid defense so far this year, despite probably their best player, Shaq Leonard, being out for the majority of the year. I think he only played in 3 games. He was injured to start, and then he got re-injured and is now out for the rest of the season. So Gus Bradley's their defensive coordinator. Traditionally, Gus Bradley has stuck very strongly to his cover 3 Seattle scheme, that he learned in Seattle and is stuck and really has not adapted at all. I forgot to look up their coverage statistics, so I can't tell you whether or not that's the case this year, but I expect it to stay that way. From personnel, they've got Stephon Gilmore in the cornerback room. He's played pretty well, I would say, especially considering his age. We figured maybe he had dropped off a little bit, but he's been a starting quality player for them. Kenny Moore is a great slot corner, one of the best slot corners in the league. He was D&P each of the 2 days of practice so far this week. We're recording this on Wednesday. And he was out for the game last week. It looks like it's pretty likely that he's not going to play. At least my reading of the tea leaves says I don't expect him to play. Which leaves, I don't think they have a great secondary outside of that. Julian Blackmon played really well his first year as a safety. On the defensive line, I do think they have some talent there. Grover Stewart is one of the most underrated defensive tackles in the league, in my opinion. He kind of first came on my radar, actually, the last Vikings-Colts game in 2020, which was, I believe, Justin Jefferson's second career game. It was kind of the last game before we knew what we had in Justin Jefferson, right? But Grover Stewart just kind of dominated Garrett Bradbury the entire game in that game, and I was like, who's number 90? I've never heard of him before. Turned out it was Grover Stewart. I knew they had DeForest Buckner, who I don't know what his status for this game is either. I think he's healthy and ready to play. So they've got DeForest Buckner in addition to him. They also have 2 former Vikings in Yannick Ngakoue, who's a starter for them, and Ifeadi Odenigbo, who I think is just a backup, but I noticed that he was on their roster. Yannick Ngakoue, obviously, we know is a great speed rusher, not a great run defender, not great at really other forms of rushing the passer, but he does have that one elite trick in his bag, and he uses it pretty effectively, so he can get you once or twice. They also have Kwity Paye, who I liked a lot in the 2021 draft, and he has missed a couple games this year, but he also has 5 sacks in the 8 games that he's played. So he's come along a little bit as a pass rusher. So their front 4, I think, is pretty good. I think they might be able to get pressure with 4, especially if Christian Darrisaw is still out. Hopefully he's able to get back and play in this game, and it'll definitely shore up our protection a little bit. Any thoughts on the Colts defense from you, Nick?
I honestly don't have that much to add. I mean, I think you covered it. I think this is a really talented squad. I think if you look up their DVOA or their EPA per play, it doesn't suggest they're like an elite squad. But I
Mm-hmm.
feel like Stephon Gilmore is really good. I think Isaiah Rodgers has had like a good kind of a bit of a breakout season a little bit in the time he's played. They have that great front four. DeForest Buckner, that was the guy. When I think of DeForest Buckner, I think of him doing that hump move to I think it was Dakota Dozier.
Yeah,
It was just like
probably.
tossed him out of the ring. So Buckner is in my mind one of the better, one of the best, kind of an all-pro caliber interior defensive lineman. So that with Grover Stewart, I think it's a really talented line. And Yannick Ngakoue, he knows. Vikings fans are familiar with him. That cross chop that he has, he's able to get home to the quarterback, and he kind of knows how to set himself up for the pass rush, even though he doesn't really care about run defense. But when you're a pass rusher, you get paid for sacks, really. So I don't blame him so much. So, I mean, it's a really talented defense. Kind of a more zone heavy. They like to play a little more too high stuff, it's been a while since the Vikings have seen that because I feel like so many of their teams have been, it's the Patriots, the Lions,
Mm-hmm.
Eagles, these sort of man heavy defense. Well, Eagles aren't man heavy, but the way they played the Vikings, it kind of played out that way a little bit. People playing a lot of like aggressive man coverage and doubling Justin Jefferson. So maybe this is a game where we see Jefferson versus zone, which he's probably just I mean Jefferson will beat whatever you throw at him. But if I had to pick one of those, he's probably better at finding soft spots in zone, which is, I mean, it's just a little bit easier to do than separate from guys who are trying to stay attached to your hip. So um, it's a talented unit. I feel like the Vikings will have it'll be a good test, I think, for the offense. Can Kirk Cousins keep that level of play up that he did last year, and can Dalvin Cook bounce back, run blocking bounce back? Will be a good test, I think, for us. Some of the offensive linemen they're getting back. Hopefully Garrett Bradbury helps a little bit, and he can get healthy. And Ed Ingram doesn't get completely demolished the way that right guards of years past have been by DeForest Buckner. But I feel like I'm a lot more confident in the Vikings' ability to put up points on this Colts defense because teams have, and the Colts offense to put up points on the Vikings defense, which is surprising coming off this last game, where the Vikings gave up everything. But I feel like just the matchups are a little bit more advantageous to the Vikings, and it helps that it's at home. The Vegas, for what it's worth, has the Vikings favored to bounce back in this one. They're favored by 4 points. It's in Minnesota, so they do think the Vikings are a better team even on a neutral field. So that's good to see, and I feel like that's right. If anything, I would probably not a betting person, but if I were, I'd put even more money on the Vikings. I feel like the line should probably be even more heavily favored towards the Vikings because I feel like this is just Vikings are more talented, and I feel like this is just a favorable matchup for the Vikings given the two philosophies and styles of team.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. I think the Vikings should be favored. I think the Vikings should probably be favored a little bit more heavily than they are. And I think they really should win this game and wrap up the division, right? Obviously, if the Vikings win this week, they will have clinched the division because the Lions can't get to 11 wins. They can only get to 10 wins. So if we hit 11, we clinch the division. We're guaranteed a playoff spot. And actually, we're guaranteed at least the third seed because the Bucks are leading the NFC South, and they currently have 7 losses too. So, really, it's important for the Vikings to win at least one game down the stretch, and we've got 4 to do it. So I'm hoping it comes Saturday against the Colts. It'll be the first game we see this week. I don't know if there's a Thursday night game, but it'll be an early game. It'll be nationally broadcast. Everybody should be able to see it. So that'll be nice. And with that, I think we're going to wrap up the show. I'm Matt Freese. You can find me at Fries Football. He's Nick Olson. You can find him at Nick Olson NFL. Our co-host Greg is at You've Been Gregged. We are at Kindred Skulls on Twitter. We're available on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, and we're also available on YouTube if you search for Kindred Skulls. Leave us those 5-star rating reviews on your favorite podcast platform. We'd really appreciate it. And Skull Vikings.
Cool. Cool, baby.
Another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. And we'll all cheer on behind. and we'll score the